So what is the best SMMA business model to use today? Is it charging monthly retainers? Is it pay per lead, per appointment, profit share, pay in full? If you've had an agency for less than honestly, even 2 years, you're probably in the same position I was, where I used to be really confused, overwhelmed about which model to pick because everyone's telling you to do something different. And as a result, I ended up wasting time switching between a bunch of different models before I was able to find the one that I really wanted to use the most, that fit my agency the best. Every agency is different, so the right question to ask, in my opinion, is what's the best SMMA business model for me to use today? So that's what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to run you through all the most popular ones so that you can decide for yourself and find the best, most scalable model for you. So what are the best models today? There are 4 ones that we're going to go through. One of them is retainers. Are they even good? Because there's so much talk about retainers. They're like the classic. You have an agency, you charge $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month or $1,500 a month, something like this. So are they even good? Are they something that you should use in your agency? What are retainers all about? So I'm going to cover pros and cons for each one of these and dive deeper into them. So starting with some of the pros, one of the biggest, most obvious ones is the recurring income, which is consistent and so on and so forth. Any agency model really does have recurring income, but this is stable income. It's flat every single month. It's predictable, right? You know what you're going to get. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. Transparently, I'm struggling to find things that I like about the retainer model. One other thing, I don't really like retainers in general, but they're still one of the best models today because they just work, right? That's one little thing. But one thing I also like is you can over deliver pretty easily. And the thing is though, as I write this down, these are all pretty generic things that you can do with other models. And what you'll want to pay attention to if you're considering using a retainer is, what are most people in the market doing? Are most people using retainers? Are most people using a different kind of model? What are the options that are being presented in the marketplace? And how does that make me competitive? Because one of the big cons of retainers is that, especially if you have commitments, like a 6-month commitment or something like that, then people just get a little bit spooked. They're like, I don't want to lock in for no reason. I want to be able to leave whenever I want to leave, and so on and so forth. And that puts you in this really weird position where if somebody's offering some kind of hey, you're charging $1,000 a month and you have a 4-month lock or a 6-month lock or a 3-month lock, they're committing to $3,000, $4,000, $6,000. Whereas the guy who's doing pay per lead or pay per appointment, he's like, hey, pay me a base of $500, $1,000, and then just pay me on performance, right? So having commitments, just like perceived risk, is another challenging thing. And you also need to be able to balance. I mean, this is true with everything, but you need to be able to balance the amount of output they're getting for what they're actually paying you, right? And that's hard to predict in the beginning when you haven't run ads for clients and you don't know what outcomes people can expect. But perceived risk versus competitors is one of the tough things here. And and from their point of view, even if you suck, they pay. So you could put this in the pros section, but if you want to do good and honest business, which is what I promote, this is a pretty shit model. Because if you suck, they still pay. They're going to get pissed off. You get the money anyway. It's like, do you want to refund it? Well, no, right? And then you get into these annoying situations, and it's just not ideal, really, for you or them. So that's where performance models can be beneficial in the beginning because you're mitigating their risk for them within the model, and you're not having them, have to make big commitments to anything, so on and so forth. So I know we're talking about, performance-based thing, and we'll get into those in a minute, but I don't know. I just don't love retainers for this reason, to be completely honest. Again, you can totally over-deliver. So that's one side of them, and one thing that's really nice. It also depends on who you're selling to. Can people afford them? But there's also this idea of just perceived expense. It's very face value, this is what you're going to pay, and it's going to be X amount of dollars. That can be a good thing, or that can be a bad thing if your services are expensive, depending on who you're selling to. Hopefully this makes sense so far. Let me know if it's not. So moving on to the second one, which is pay per X. So these performance-based models, pay per lead, pay per appointment, pay per close. Pay per lead, one of the biggest pros, easy to deliver. very easy to deliver, easy to get to high retainers, honestly. Because let's say you're charging like $50 a lead, right? Like if you're using on Facebook lead forms, there's a really good chance you can get a boatload of those. But so that's one of the cons there, is that you need to balance like being fair with your pricing, because nobody's going to stick around long enough if you're charging way too much per lead, right? And that does go with all of these models. But leads are very easy to deliver. Like it's not hard to generate leads for somebody. It's harder to generate appointments and it's harder to generate closed deals, right? So we'll get into those in a second. How you structure your pricing, that is nothing to do with this conversation at the moment. That's where you need to know your economics in your business. What leads can you generate? What are the average lead costs that are coming in? So on and so forth. Again, it's pretty difficult in the beginning. You can leverage other people's expertise to find those numbers without having them initially yourself if you're modeling someone else's process. But again, pay per lead, easy to deliver, easy to get to high retainers with people, easy to sell because low upfront amounts of money is what you're charging, right? Oftentimes, again, it's like a base of something relatively low plus, paid per lead, right? So easy to get people in the door, easier to market as well, because if you're doing more of this like offer centric marketing, which is so common today. I'm not a fan of it personally. I like marketing more to people's problems. But if you have a strong offer, then that can be something nice that you add on top to make it sound better. I'm not scream the offer from the mountaintops kind of guy, like Hormozy is, for example. People have different styles, but if you have a better offer, it's going to absolutely help you. So that's one of the pros there. You do need to, again, though, learn to balance being fair with your pricing. And if you're scaling with ads, it can be expensive. So let's say it costs you $1,000 to acquire a client. You're getting $500 up front and you don't get paid for the first 30 days, right? It's like, well, now you're going $500 in the hole for the first 30 days with every single client before you charge them X amount of money, right? So you ideally don't want to scale into the red unless you know your numbers really well, unless you have capital to burn, so on and so forth. So that's something worth paying attention to if you're going to do really any of these pay per models. You can get wedged into like paying ad spend for clients yourself, which can be a very dangerous game if you're new. I wouldn't suggest this for somebody who's new. You can do it, again, if you know the numbers, et cetera, but I don't know. It's just a little bit weird. You can lose all your money in like 5 seconds. So it can be, it can be an easier place to start if you're not spending the ad dollars yourself. Looking on the pay per appointment side of things, one of the pros is it's even easier to sell than pay per lead. It's even easier to sell because you're bringing somebody that's one step further down in the process, right? You also have more control over the delivery process, right? And client results ultimately, because you're the one, or your team are the ones that are booking the appointments. So you can control the output if you have people in-house doing that. So that's something that's really worth paying attention to. Again, even easier to market, even easier to sell. You can also get to high retainers relatively easily. But one of the big cons with pay per appointment is it can be very challenging. It can be very challenging to get to high retainers. Like on pay per lead, it can be very easy to get somebody 75 leads. And if you're charging them $20 a lead, then that's $1,500 a month right there. Like incredibly easy to get to high retainers. Whereas with appointments, depending on what your lead costs are coming through, depending on your niche, so on and so forth, and depending on what your costs are for whether you're at the beginning, you're going to have to do this, right? But then let's say you outsource to a company like an ISA company, or let's say you hire somebody in-house. Now you have costs involved there. So you should be charging more than you would here. And that can be a difficult game to play. I know people who have, like one of my clients, for example, his name's Patrick. He's been in the agency game for a little over 2 years now, but when we met in January, he was in the game for about 2 years. He was on like a 5-6 month dry streak, zero revenue coming in, because he was on pay per appointment and he had clients, but his profitability was like nothing. Like he was getting completely screwed. because he's in real estate. He was working with expensive leads, so on and so forth. He was calling leads himself. He was just burning out and making nothing. And by switching him over to a pay in full model, which we'll get into in a little bit, he managed to do like 14K cash within 14 days at the end of February. So that was a pretty cool little thing. I helped him with some other stuff too. Like he had a good cold email process, but we made it even better. Helped him with a little bit on the sales appointment setting side as well. So there were a few things that happened there. But point in hand, he is not the only person I've heard that has struggled to get to high retainers and really high profitability, right? You get high profitability here with pay per lead, but on the pay per appointment side, that can be challenging. Now on pay per close, you can take the pay per lead service model, meaning you're only generating the leads and they're calling the leads, booking their own appointments and closing their own deals. So you can take the pay per lead service model and take a bigger chunk on closed deals, because the one who takes more the risk gets the profit. The one who takes more risk gets more of the profit, really. So you're able to make more money as you go down this ladder, but you're taking on more risk ultimately, right? As you can see in Patrick's case here as an example, it's a challenging thing to do. And if you're doing pay per close, you really need to make sure that you're selling to the right person. So this can be a pretty difficult challenge altogether, and it's potentially unreliable. If you're in a market where, like, it's tough in markets where there's a long buying cycle. So in real estate, right? Like, would you want to do pay per close in real estate? Probably not, unless you're doing some insanely high scale kind of thing, or you're only working with certain types of people. I mean, you can't even legally do it in real estate in most places, like e.g. America, because of the fact that you need to be licensed in order to take any commission on deals. I'm not licensed, so this wasn't even an option for me. Initially, this is what I actually wanted to do. I wanted to like call leads, book the appointments, etc. But looking back, I'm glad I didn't, because the buying cycle is crazy. Like, leads take months to convert in the real estate space, right? And real estate agents are often sketchy people. I've been not paid for things like this in the past myself. Even working full time at a real estate office, didn't get paid $450 for, actually it was on pay per close, it was for commission by my own boss. So sick, right? Yeah, that's something to pay attention to on pay per close. It is difficult, it's potentially unreliable. So you can take a bigger chunk on closed deals in general to pay per close model, but it can be more challenging, and you probably want to have an appointment setting team. At that point, it's like you almost might as well just like run the business for them, really. But sometimes you need licensing, so on and so forth, so it's not necessarily an option for everybody. So moving on to number 3, base plus profit share. So this is kind of like the pay per close combined with the retainer model. So one of the pros of this is you get the base, you get commission on performance too. One of the cons here though is that there's more pressure. There's more pressure on you, right? You're getting paid on performance, and that's one of the cons really with all of the points on number 2 is, I mean, in an agency in general, really, so I don't want to put too many generalities here, but there is pressure in all of these. But if you're looking at like a base plus profit share kind of situation, there is more pressure there as well, just because a percentage of your income is coming from the results that you're getting for the person. Now that can be a very good thing because you're incentivized to perform. Now this, maybe it's a good thing for you, maybe it's a bad thing for you. In my eyes, it's a good thing for you because a lot of the times, more often than we think, we should be looking through the lens or through the eyes of the client and thinking about what's best for them, because that's how a healthy business is made in the first place. So you're incentivized to perform, which is a really good thing. There is more pressure, which is a little bit tougher of a thing. Generally speaking, you only want to do this with more sophisticated clients and people you already have a relationship with, right? Because you can still, with same thing as like pay per close and all that stuff, like you can get jibbed by people, they won't pay you, whatever, right? So you are still taking on some risk, which is why you're able to make more money, right? But again, more risk. So these are some things that you can look at with a base plus profit share. Generally speaking, this is something that you do on higher retainer accounts or higher ad spend accounts. So let's say you're spending 100 grand a month for a client. You'll take a base of maybe 8% of ad spend, so call it, 8K, and then you'll take, 5% of net profit or 10% of net profit or 20% of net profit, meaning after ad spend, after your fees, after team, what's the amount left over? You get a percentage of that as a bonus on top, just from all of the money that came in from your specific campaign, right? Not from their entire business. So that's a pretty cool one that you can do as well. So that if you're working with people on bigger accounts, that's something you'd want to do. If you're working in competitive niches, pay per lead seems like a pretty decent option right now. Retainers are always classic, but the next one is the PIF model, or the pay in full model. You get paid upfront before providing any services. Cons, harder to sell because you're asking for all of the money up front, right? The perceived risk is higher. The risk is higher for them. It absolutely is. So if you're competing with somebody who's offering, again, the pay per lead, and you're trying to charge them 5 grand, 10 grand up front, something like that, like it's just going to be a harder sell when they have that option with that guy over there where, well, there's no lock in, like I'll need to pay $500 up front. And then if this guy doesn't get me anything, then like I'm fine. Nothing's really going to happen here. So the risk is higher for prospects. It is harder for you to sell, therefore. You don't necessarily get paid upfront in every situation. Sometimes there are split pays. So you can end up basically just kind of in a retainer situation. So those are some of the things there. Pay in fulls are obviously very desirable because don't we all just want to get a big whack of cash up front? Like obviously. But another one of the cons, and this is through the client's eyes, is you are not incentivized to perform, right? I mean, if you have a guarantee, then great, right? And if you actually hold yourself to that guarantee, then fantastic. But again, through the client's eyes, like you're not really incentivized to perform, at least through a smart client's eyes, right? You're just, you get the money, you could do basically nothing, you could slack off, whatever, right? It's not like you're having to fight to get the money to keep coming in. So those are four of the best models today. They're still tried and true. They work. There's a reason that they exist. You don't need to get too fancy with your pricing models, but you do want to think, there's one really important question to ask yourself, which is, what is the best model for my agency given my strategy? And a really key word here is my strategy, right? If your plan is to scale with cold outreach and have your offer be the leading point in all of it, and you're talking about, having like a, performance-based or whatever, like $0 up front in a hypothetical world, it's like, well, okay, that's going to attract a big flock of people, and then you're able to sell that pretty easily. Whereas if your strategy is to scale with ads, then you'll need the capital to be able to go negative to do that, to come out positive in 30 to 60 days time, right? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about these different things. What are your costs associated? For example, if you use the pay in full model, when a little con here is that you end up getting like 50 to maybe 80% cash up front when you're optimized, and 80% is pretty high. Like in a lot of cases, you'll end up getting 50% of this cash up front, and then the rest of it comes on split pays. So that's one little flaw there. So what is it that you're really trying to do here? Do you need cash right now to survive? Maybe the pay in full model is better, right? So it's strategy and situation. Do you not really need cash? Are you looking for case studies? Then maybe you want to do something like a pay per lead or something like that, or potentially even a pay per close, depending on your situation, so that you can rack up case studies and get 1 million people coming in the door really quickly, right? It totally depends on your situation. So you want to think about, where are you at? What are you trying to do? And which one of these best suits you? If you want to work closely with me and have me help you in your personal situation, build a strategy, this kind of stuff, I do have a private scaling group for agency owners. You can book a sales call with me. It is a sales call, not a free consulting call. There's a link in the description. You can go book that there if you want. If not, you can click whatever's popping up on screen here, and I'll see you there.